I'd like to welcome you to the Board of Supervisors meeting this March 17th, 2026. Do we have any changes to the tentative agenda?
I have none.
I have none.
Okay.
I have none.
Then next we have to meet with department heads, elected officials. Brandon M., IT.
Just keeping busy, nothing really new to report.
Okay. Brooke Marlin, Veterans Affairs.
Good morning. We had our Veterans Coffee and Conversation last week. We had 33 in attendance, which is our highest number so far. So we're slowly growing. Other than that, we're just keeping busy.
All right. Chris Lee, Conservation.
It's a little cold out there.
Spring.
Yeah, right? Welcome to Iowa. We just kind of spent our time yesterday hunkering down. I think a lot of the staff just didn't come in. We had guys come in and clean the roads and stuff. That was crazy in the morning. Other than that, we got some events coming up. I'll put a plug in for the Iheart County Parks Banquet, April 4th. That's our foundation's banquet for our department directly. We are still soliciting sponsors for that, so if you have a business or know somebody that has a business and wants to sponsor it, we'll put your name all over it. And then you can get tickets online if you'd like to come to it. It's a barbecue dinner. And then we are still looking for sponsors for Burlington River Days, which is also a event for the Partners for Conservation Foundation. So just rolling with that. And, there's events coming up. We've got a shed hunt. We've got, I don't even remember what we got coming up. Going dmcconservation.com, you can find everything there, or our Facebook pages.
They find a lot of sheds out there when you have that hunt, or do you have?
This is the first time we've done it, so I guess we'll see. If nothing else, it's a good excuse to go walking around the woods. That's really what it's all about.
All right. Janelle Nally Lundquist, Treasurer.
Good morning. We're keeping busy. Lots of property tax payments are rolling in. I do want to remind everybody that Tuesday, March 31st, is the last day to make that payment to avoid penalty. And, you know, a lot of our, what I want to say, we have a lot of mandates with the postmarks being allowed to avoid delinquency. I just want to remind everybody that the United States Postal Service has changed their policy. So just because you drop it in a mailbox doesn't necessarily mean it's going to receive a postmark. They recommend taking it, walking it into the post office and getting it hand stamped. Because a lot of it's just going to processing places. They've changed how they do that. So just a reminder, please make sure if if you're one of those last minute people that do it the last day, you need to take it into the post office and get it hand stamped, or it's likely going to be dated the next day. So very important for our office. So that's it.
Can I touch on that last subject? And I think I'm the senior elected official in Moines County. I've been here forever, but more than once I've been in that office on the 1st of April, and somebody comes up or comes in and 8:15 in the morning, they said, I was here about, they closed the doors a minute earlier or whatever, or but they said, it's still.
I close those
Out of your
doors and I
hands.
do not close a minute early. So
I realize that, but anyway, something they think that they can talk themselves out of it.
Yeah.
Nobody has the power to do that.
No.
There has to be a cutoff point, and that's it. So
even if it's one day,
yeah.
yeah.
Can they use that box downstairs?
Yes, the drop-off box up until
Drop-off box
4:30.
downstairs until
Yes.
4:30?
Until 4:30.
Okay, they
yeah.
can't do it after 4:30.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Is that all you got?
Yes.
That's plenty. Jared Lassiter, Land Use.
Good morning. Despite the winter's best efforts, there are a lot of people out there already thinking spring. So we've had a fair amount of new inquiries about whether the permits are necessary to build something or for possible subdivision, splitting of land. So there's definitely going to be some activity in the spring as we typically see. At the moment, don't have anything on the agenda, but probably anticipate one or two minor subdivisions to be submitted here shortly. And then we have the work session about the flood ordinance, and that's all I have.
Okay. Angie Vaughn, safety.
And good morning. Really don't have anything to add today.
Okay. Krista Kogemiller, Health Department.
Good morning. We're keeping busy and we're seeing a lot of upper respiratory that people are talking about. So I always want to remind everyone that, you know, if you're sick, please stay home, you know, do the good hand hygiene. But all those things that we do when we come up with the upper respiratory, we are seeing a lot of that this time of the year. So other than that, I don't have anything to
Okay. Sarah Marie, Auditor.
Good morning. Cheryl, Becky, and I went to ISAC last week, so that was fun. We learned some new things. This week, Friday at 5 o'clock is the deadline to submit for county candidates for the upcoming primary election. Globe Life contacted me about coming here and talking to employees, so they are going to be here in the boardroom on Friday from 11 to 1. They're going to have like ice cream and snacky stuff from 11 to 1 to see if anyone's interested in extra life insurance or the accidental and things that they offer. So that will be here as well. But just business as usual, keeping busy.
Okay. Did I forget anybody? Brian Carter,
Ryan Carter.
County Engineer.
Well, since Rodney and Kevin aren't here to talk about weather ahead of me, I'll talk about the weather. Obviously, it's been a very late but very active last couple day snow season. I would have to say, in my opinion, even though we had a very busy December, I think this was the worst storm we've had this year, or is the worst storm. It's not over, even though it's sunny and calm. You'd rather people get reminded how to drive at the beginning of winter so they can kind of learn from that, but I think a lot of people got caught off guard. I think I saw more accidents, more cars, more semis and ditches this go around than maybe the entire winter all added up together. And part of that was because the way that was a really wet, heavy snow, and the way as hard as that wind blew, first things first, you couldn't keep material on the roadway. I mean, as soon as it fell off the spinner, the wind took it at 50 mile per hour like it took everything else. But then that snow would blow across the road, and the heat from the tires would basically stick it down. You eventually, with that repetitive process, end up with ice, whether you like it or not. And so yesterday it was, I'm sure accident after accident was because you'd be going along on honestly pretty decent paved, even in some places dry roadway on the paved roads, and then you'd find ice. So if you were cruising along at 60, doing pretty good, cruise control on, and with that wind rocking vehicles side to side and stuff, and you hit that ice, I think it just caused people to lose control. And it wasn't, I mean, I think the DOT had a little more black ice than we did, which is even more slick than what we had, but ours was, it was a really rough ice, but it was, you weren't gonna, if you lost control on it, you weren't gonna get it back very well. So, fortunately today it's calmer, and even though it's colder, our material will work really well. I would think even by now with the sun, we've probably got things down to mostly wet, maybe a little bit slushy, because some of that ice was pretty darn thick by the end of that storm. We had more drifting on our gravel road probably than we've had in a while, especially big drifts. I mean, there were again places that were blown clear, but it was such a wet, dense snow, and then overnight it got down to 7 degrees, so then it froze. And so think twice before you go trying to plow through a drift that maybe you went through yesterday and made it through, because it's hard snow this morning, and it's coming up in chunks. And I know we had, just an example, out in the area where I live, I know the motor grader went through late morning, and then another spot got cleared again middle to late afternoon, and that same spot was plugged solid to vehicles by last night. So that doesn't make for, the problem is people don't feel like you're getting anywhere, and to some extent you're not, but when you gotta hit a spot that many times, and obviously you've got a certain territory to cover, so you don't get to just sit there. So a little patience, and honestly, people were pretty patient yesterday as far as our end of it. So we really appreciate that. Thank you to the guys. It is our job, but let me assure you, when they left the shop at 5 o'clock yesterday morning, I left my driveway at 4:30 or, yeah, about there yesterday morning. I couldn't see the end of my hood through the blowing snow. I mean, it was literally completely zero visibility. And so when you're out there trying to run a motor grader and that, it's an uncomfortable feeling. I think we ended up with a couple guys that drove into the ditch. I mean, they do their best to kind of gauge the power poles and try to stay between stuff. But so we had a couple guys get stuck. We pulled them back out. We did end up with one motor grader that went down, and it's an electrical thing. It wouldn't be major, but you know, mechanics don't just fall out of trees for those things. So we'll get them today or tomorrow and get it going. So we spread out and backfill on that one. We had 2 trucks break down. One of those is backfilling this morning. So we're back to we have all our trucks running. We never were really down. We just went to our backups, put the snow equipment on them, and it's one of the reasons you keep backup equipment. But the guys, it was a hard go yesterday. It's a really long 12 or 13 hours when all you do is stare at nothing but whiteout, and you're trying to stay focused. You're trying not to get blown sideways into the vehicle coming at you, and of course the vehicle coming at you might not be doing very well either. So we didn't have any accidents on our end. Credit to Kevin's guys, law enforcement. They were on top of things. I was at an accident or came up on an accident. Thankfully, I don't think anybody was particularly hurt, but they showed up along with the state trooper and then of course the volunteer fire departments, and credit to all of them. They got things going. They got a lane back open and handled their business, and it was impressive from all those guys. So that was up towards Yarmouth. It was miserable. It looked like a nice day out a window, but you know, that wind was still howling and it was cold, and they took care of those people. So appreciated their efforts. And we had some problems early yesterday for some reason. I don't know if it was a visibility thing, but there were just some cars that just left. I came across 5 o'clock yesterday morning. I saw 4-way flashers on Iowa City Road, just south of Mediapolis Road, the main route to the gypsum plant. And so I pulled down just to check things out. There's a newer little SUV in the southbound lane. Nobody in it. Flashers on. I mean, they were creating a drift, but there was no drift. I don't know the story. We made a phone call. Well, no, we called law enforcement. Law enforcement came up and called dispatch, and they were told there was a statewide tow van, so they didn't tow it. So I called the truck guy later on. He said, yeah, it's still there. He said, it's not the only one. And well, that's where all your semis are coming in and out, along with the workforce coming in and out of USG. And Pleasant Grove Road during days like that, it's curved. It just fills up. You can't drive it. Plus there was a car parked / stuck in the middle of it, so we couldn't even get through it. So I called Kevin and said, hey, I emailed him and I said, is there anything we can do here? I said, it's just not safe. This isn't a good thing. And he got right on it, got with one of his, I don't know, I'm sure it wasn't a deputy, probably one of his patrol sergeants or lieutenants or something like that, and got a hold of me and said, we're sending a deputy, and if it can be done safely, we'll get that stuff out of the way. And they did. They called in a tow truck and made sure it was done safely and towed that vehicle. I think they towed a couple others, and then they towed the one off Pleasant Grove first so that we could actually get a plow truck through it. And the Pleasant Grove was probably stuck. I mean, Pleasant Grove, if you don't know what you're doing, just stay away from it, because it just fills up. That's what that curb and gutter does. But anyway, thank you to all the people that helped us do our jobs. And thanks to everybody that stayed home. So that was good too, but you can't always stay home. I mean, we went to work, I went to the office. Not everybody can stay home. That's the way it goes. You know, I'm sure they run 3 shifts at USG, and I'm sure they're expected to be there. So it was quite the day, and we're gonna spend the whole day today cleaning up and the gravels, Mediapolis had to cancel again because I don't think you could run a bus route right now if you wanted to. They just have buses stuck.
Well, can you use the driver's license plate number to contact the owner?
I don't know. I mean, I leave that to law enforcement. I made sure that Kevin passed it on that I didn't, if they got a hold of somebody and they could come.
Yeah, or give you permission to.
It didn't matter to me. I mean, law enforcement is the one that has the right to forcibly tow it.
Yeah.
We don't have that right. And so, yeah, it was, just one of the safety things. So appreciated all the different people helping, and we just kind of kept on going, and we're back at it today.
Brian, that accident you come upon, I understand that you, some of the people was out there in the cold and you let them get in your car and warm up.
Well, I was the first one on site, and it broke the window out of one vehicle, and it was a younger couple, and she was definitely startled and sore, and I mean, there was no warmth to be had in the wind. So yeah, absolutely. I cleared out the back seat, and I ended up with 3 of the 4 in the vehicle, and the other one got in somebody else. I think the state patrol's vehicle when they showed up. So yeah, they need to get warmed up. They were rattled anyway. They took a hard hit. The vehicle with the 3 people, I think they spun at least 2 or 3 times. They thought. Fortunately, they stayed on the road, and so that was just a bad timing thing. Just ice in the wrong spot and bad timing that a car was coming through there. But good thing is they weren't significantly hurt at least. So, but yeah, it was a rough one yesterday for a lot of people. So don't worry, it'll be 80 on Saturday. So. Anyway, thanks to everybody, and especially thanks to my guys. Again, it's their job, but
No doubt.
they did it well yesterday. I'm sure dealt with a lot of frustrations, but they kept it together and kept going. And like I said, I don't think we had any accidents other than a few vehicles in the ditch, and we pulled those back out and kept on going.
Right on.
So,
Any questions from the news table? All right. Let's move on to discussion and vote. First, we have 5A, which is accounts payable claims in the amount of $580,515.21 in checks, $90,820.74 in wire transfer payments for a grand total of $671,335.95. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
second.
Moved and second. Sarah Marie?
Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
Tom Broker?
Yes.
Shane McCampbell?
Yep. And next we have payroll reimbursement claims in the amount of $461.91.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved in second. Sarah Marie?
Tom Broker?
Yes.
Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
Shane McCampbell?
Yep. That brings us to 5C, the rural resident cleanup. Des Moines County Board of Supervisors are sponsoring a county-wide rural cleanup Monday, April 6th through Saturday, June 6th. That is Monday, April 6th through Saturday, June 6th. Metal items, for example, lawnmowers, bicycles, tin roofing, metal cabinets, bed springs and rails, swing sets, metal fencing, other metal items, household items such as sofas and chairs, mattresses, clothing not suitable for donation, rugs and carpets, tables and toys. The recycling center is taking refrigerators, freezers, washers, dryers, air conditioners, and stoves.
That's part of the recycling. That's all free to the program. The ladder stuff you just mentioned.
Yep.
I want to encourage everybody to take advantage of this instead of throwing their crap in the ditch.
Amen. Preach,
I'm
brother.
here to tell you, lately, we've had lazy boys by the bedside. I mean, every appliance you can imagine are right by the roadside. They're getting lazier and lazier. They don't even put them on the shoulder anymore sometimes.
I thought that lazy
That
boy
lazy
they
boy's
put
on
out,
the other side of the road now. They got it out of their yard.
that lazy boy coming out for you, Brian. Because your crew was working out on that Danville Road, so they set that
I
lazy boy
saw
out
that.
for you.
Saw that one. Like I told you, there was a toilet down in Burlington, so. I just, yeah.
I heard there was something still in it too, but anyway.
It's free, so I put it in the newspaper and let people read it. Hopefully they'll go out there for free and get rid of that stuff.
Anyways, it's an opportunity to get rid of some stuff the right way, so, take advantage of that. Again, that's Monday, April 6th through Saturday, June 6th, or until the county credits are depleted. You must, furnish proof of residency. Can I get a motion on that?
So moved.
Second?
Movement second. Sarah Marie?
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Shane McCampbell.
Yep. Okay, next brings us to personnel actions. First one is for Carissa Mackey, a naturalist intern for the Conservation Department. She is a new hire, rate of pay of $15 an hour, and her effective date is March 30th, 2026. And then I have Marcus Knack, Environmental Education Manager with the Conservation Department. It's his anniversary and a 48-month step increase. His previous rate of pay is $60,503.79. His new rate of pay is $62,375.04, effective March 19th. I got a motion to approve both?
So moved.
Second?
Moved in second. Sarah Marie?
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yeah.
Shane McCampbell.
Yes. And then next we have Peyton Krogmeyer, Correctional Officer for the Correctional Center, and it is his completion of employment effective March 10th. Can I get a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved in second. Sarah Marie?
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Shane McCampbell.
Yes.
Is it me or somebody cooking, so?
Somebody's making toast or something.
I can smell it.
I'm glad everybody else can. I was sitting here thinking.
I can smell it.
I'm about ready to go like this, you know.
All right. Next we have meetings for the regular meeting on March 10th. Minutes, I'm sorry, for the regular meeting on March 10th, 2026.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Moved in second. Sarah Marie?
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Shane McCampbell.
Yep. Do we have any future agenda items?
I have none.
I have none.
Committee reports.
I attended the Iowa State Association of Counties Spring Conference, and most of the interesting stuff was the legislative discussion, and nothing really new on the latest property tax bills. There's still 3 separate bills, so there's nothing concrete to consider yet. Although they did discuss the bill that eliminates township officials, and that's almost unanimously unpopular. So they didn't get any support on that at all. And that was about that.
I attended the Rural Utility Service Systems. Everything seems to be going pretty good there. We did gonna hire an intern for the summer to help. That's, he got his, in his last year of college for his, health and everything, so he'll be able to do pool inspections and do all types of the, inspections on the peat moss and everything and some of the septic systems and that, and also the water, so that's all I've got.
Okay. Now comes the time for public input. We would love to hear from you. You can always email us at boardboard@dmcounty.com. Again, that is boardboard@dmcounty.com, or you can call in at 319-753-8282. That number again is 319-753-8282. Is there anybody from the audience that has any comments or concerns? I'm panning the room. Not everybody at once.
Well, if nobody else has anything to say, I just had to check with Krista. But yes, Jim, it's good that everybody was smelling that toast, because you know the smell of burnt toast can be a symptom or a sign of stroke.
All right.
So I did have to understand that. She's like, yeah, it is.
All right.
So it's a good thing we're all
We're all
smelling.
gonna stroke out.
Man, she's just got all kinds of good news today. Wow.
Tell me I'm old without
Well, I
telling
thought-
me
I
I'm
get-
old.
You learn something new every day. I'm scared to make toast now.
Toaster, you'll miss it.
We're gonna have to talk to whoever's doing that and start cooking bacon.
If you gotta do it right.
Okay, I'd like to make one comment, I'd like maybe the board to think about. And I've had several people contact me and read some stuff in the newspapers about data centers, and I know almost nothing about them. Anyway, and a couple of people said, well, you should get a moratorium until you know something about it. Well, we don't have countywide zoning, so it doesn't require a permit to build anything. It's hard to require a moratorium on something that doesn't exist. So, and I don't know, and I asked Jared, and I'm gonna push him more further, but if you guys think that we can discuss it at another meeting, maybe, he could look around the state and see if there's another unzoned county that has an ordinance. The reason we had a moratorium on wind is because we created an ordinance a couple years ago. And so we had permits required for that. But we don't have anything for data centers, so, and hear all sorts of stuff, so I don't know anything about it. But if there was something, if the board would be interested in looking at something like that, Jared could check and say, okay, there's 2 unzoned counties that have such an ordinance and it looks like this. If we wanted to, at least haven't convinced Jared, but if we wanted to, we could sort of adopt that ordinance. Once we've adopted that ordinance, then we could have a moratorium and look at it. And I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea. That's why I'm just flipping a coin in the air and see what you guys think. You don't need to answer right now, we can talk about it another time.
Well, I've done a lot of reading on these, data centers. It's the stuff that, they're gonna put all is gonna go into the groundwater and also it's gonna leak down into the rivers and that. And what I understand, they cannot clean that. Anybody up and down the Mississippi River doesn't have the potential or they don't have the equipment or stuff to get this out of the drinking water system. So, I don't know. I'd like to have an expert come in and talk to us, about it, because I don't wanna get in another dogfight over something that I don't know about.
I agree.
Maybe you could check on that, Jared, if there is an unzoned county that.
Well, I talked to Zach last week. He just did a basic online search, I think, for using the AI function on Google, asking for counties in Iowa that aren't zoned that have regulations for data centers, and it came up with something that said, it mentioned a couple of counties, including one that it said was a standalone ordinance, not related to zoning, but when you click the link, you read the opening paragraph, it says it's an amendment to the zoning ordinance. So it shows you that, number one, you can't always trust AI for telling you if it's zoning or not, but also seems like it's probably not gonna be super likely that there's much out there in the way of non-zoning that regulates that. So, not saying there isn't, but we can look, but seems like it could be a challenge.
See what you come up with.
I don't trust AI either. Sometimes it just comes up to Google and it tells you something, and I have a tendency to believe it.
I know.
Once or twice it explains something that I do understand, and it didn't have it quite
If
right.
it gives you a link, you better click it and see what it says.
I found
Check for
an article
yourself.
someplace that mentioned it, so.
Anybody else from the audience?
Yeah, now I have a question.
Oh, great.
So, do you know how many counties in the state have zoning?
I don't know.
I do not.
I'm not sure at the moment. I know Jeff Hannon used to work for regional planning, do the land use before Zach and I. He had a map. It's probably like 15 years old now, but I remember it was probably around 2/3.
2/3
Yeah.
do have.
And that's just a guess offhand. I'm not sure. It may have been closer to 50%, but I think it's a majority, but it's not a huge majority. I think.
That's it. That's all. Thanks.
Oh, thank God.
Hey.
Thanks, Trace. Thanks, Trace. Anybody else from the audience?
I used to work for Jeff Hannon.
Okay, with the night, we're adjourned,
Aye.
and we have a work session following. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll go into the work session for floodplain development ordinance update. Thanks, everybody. We are here for a work session with Jared for floodplain development ordinance update. So Jared, take it away.
Well, I'll start off by giving a background overview and then we can go into the specifics. So basically, the floodplain ordinance was first adopted in '93 after the flood that year. And so basically, the ordinance establishes a set of standards for development within the what's called the special flood hazard area, which basically means the same as the 1% annual chance flood, or commonly known as 100-year flood. So those zones that are mapped by FEMA to reflect the areas that would flood in the event of a 100-year flood, and any development within that area, whether it be buildings and structures, fill, infrastructure projects of any kind, those would fall under the jurisdiction of that ordinance, which is intended to both minimize flood risk overall and for individual properties, so that development, because it's tied into the National Flood Insurance Program administered through FEMA, and so in order to, because if development is allowed, which makes it riskier for flood, then that's more of an issue for that program, because it puts more of a burden on that program. And so by having a county adopt, and then cities would adopt as well, but by having the county adopt that is a way to ensure that the residents of the county can participate in that National Flood Insurance Program, because the county is enforcing an ordinance that ensures that development within the floodplain complies with those minimum standards. So the ordinance has been readopted several times since '93. Pretty much always when there's a update to the maps. Of course, over the years, the mapping technology and the modeling that they've used has gotten much more precise than it initially was with a lot of those paper maps, and so it's continually evolving, and that's why as it gets more precise each time, there's another study that comes out, and then the maps need to be updated. And so historically, at bare minimum, that means that the ordinance also needs to be updated so that it includes a reference to the most recent maps. And then in addition to that, there's usually some other, because the Iowa DNR maintains a set of model ordinances for cities and counties, and then they have different ones depending on whether the city or county has zoning, or because sometimes the floodplain ordinance would be adopted as part of the zoning ordinance if that county has countywide zoning, whereas in this case it's a standalone floodplain ordinance. And so those model ordinances get routinely updated based on changes in state code pertaining to flood regulations, and those are developed in consultation with FEMA, and so it's in order to enforce that at the state level, there needs to be compliance there as well. So that's why that document gets routinely updated, and then whenever there's a need to update the local ordinances, the DNR will review the local ordinance and provide a list of recommended changes based on the most recent changes in the state code, as well as anything else they may notice that doesn't seem consistent with what they have on their model ordinance. So that's really what we have here today. Because recently we had discussed the floodplain advisory board, which had been established back in '93 as an appointed board to oversee this process. And as we discussed previously, we felt that because it was largely just being used as every time we update this ordinance, we'll just get their formal blessing before the board votes on the ordinance. The board had determined that seemed like an inefficient use of resources there, and so ultimately then the board voted recently to dissolve that advisory board. But in the absence of that board now, I wanted to just take this opportunity, since there's no one making a formal recommendation to you apart from internally through staff. I just wanted to make sure that we present those changes to you before we go through the process of readopting that ordinance, just so we're all on the same page with what's being recommended. And then a lot of it is pretty procedural, pretty minor, so I don't anticipate a whole lot of discussion here, but again, it's just making sure we have an opportunity to go through that, and then you can ask questions as you see fit. So, any general questions to start? Otherwise, we can go ahead and go through those individual changes. Are we ready to go into that?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the draft ordinance here, it's a red line copy, and basically what's crossed out is being removed, and what's underlined and not crossed out is being added. So if we go to page 2 of the ordinance, this is the most obvious one, well, one of the most obvious ones is the length. It looks like a lot, but really it's a relatively minor procedural change, because initially, in the section land to which regulations apply, historically they use the index map, which is used for the whole county, and each time the maps get updated, there's a new index map. And so previously it said that the flood insurance rate maps for Des Moines County and incorporated areas, as listed on firm index 190, and that has the number there, dated October 2021. Well, under the new guidelines through DNR, they want to have it so that every one of the panels are listed. I think it's just making sure, I think it can largely be inferred that anything on the index map is included there, but this just makes it 100% clear that wherever something may occur, that the jurisdiction covers all of those panels and their respective dates in which they became effective. And I think part of the reason they wanted that is because when there are several, because in this case we're primarily looking at a study that involved the Skunk River area, and then also there was a study it went into Lee County as well, so Skunk River and Lost Creek. But the rest of the county isn't being changed, and so that's why when you look at that list there's like 6 or 7 panels at the end that reference a date coming up on May 26th. Those are the ones that are going to be changed, whereas the vast majority of the county's panels will remain the same. Those were in effect in October 21, and then there were also some panels that were left over from a previous study, basically the levee district area north of Burlington. Those went into effect in 2015.
Does that mean this ordinance has to be amended every time they issue new flood insurance rate maps?
At the very least, this section needs to be amended, yes, just so that it's providing the most recent citation to when those were in effect. But going forward, it should be, instead of changing that whole entire section, it would just be, if it's only a part of the county, it would only be changing that one section and those specific panels. I will point out I've been in consultation with DNR floodplain staff about this, and there are a couple of items that I was waiting for some feedback on. I haven't heard back from them yet, but if there's a major change, I can let you know later on. But the one thing that there's a sentence towards the end of section A where it says, where uncertainty exists with respect to the precise location of the base flood boundary, the location shall be determined on the basis of the base flood elevation at that particular site in question. Now, when the DNR initially provided recommendations to us, that section was not highlighted, but they did also provide a separate document which listed the most recent changes to the statewide administrative code. And one of those says that that exact same passage was removed from the city home rule D-level model ordinance, and it said, as this was the only model ordinance to contain such a phrase. So the fact that I'm seeing that phrase in our ordinance for county, I'm thinking that may have been something that they just missed, and that they assumed it had already been removed. So I'm thinking that part, we'll probably want to remove that as well. But again, I'll be following up with them on that. I think the issue there is just that's kind of an older reference there back when the technology was a lot less precise, and we were looking at these paper maps, didn't have the GIS where you could zoom in really close and actually see with the parcel lines and the aerial photo where exactly it falls. I think because the level of precision has changed since then, that that reasoning there doesn't really apply very much anymore.
I used to use hip waders in the yards there.
So yeah, that was not crossed out on your copy, but most likely that will be removed as well, just for being redundant. So that's it for that opening chapter there. The next part is the definitions. So this is one of the more important sections, just because there's some very specific technical terms here that need to be defined a certain way in terms of how they apply. So there's several changes there. The first one on page 6, the definition of lowest floor. So this is referring to when there's minimum elevations for a building in the floodplain. Basically, the regulation is that the lowest floor of that building, including a basement, has to be at an elevation at least 1 foot above the 100-year flood height, which is called the BFE or base flood elevation. So this is the definition of what a lowest floor is. It's actually not functionally changing at all. It's just removing a redundancy, because it says the floor of the lowest enclosed area, including a basement, except when the criteria listed in the definition of enclosed, quote, enclosed area below lowest floor are met. So it has 4 items listed there. If you look on page 4, it's basically a duplicate of those 4 items that are listed there for enclosed area below lowest floor. So basically, by removing this, that removes a redundancy, and because the definition already references that other term and those 4 conditions that are listed there, this is just a means of better efficiency, getting rid of that redundancy there. And then on that same page 6, there's a slight change to the definition of maximum damage potential development. So this, I believe, was added. This term was added new to the ordinance last time in 2021. I think it had been added to the state model ordinance probably about 10 years ago. And it's basically addressing types of development where there's more of a community-wide impact if it's damaged as a result of a flood, and so there should be special consideration, special level of protection. So it lists some types of uses like hospitals, buildings with special documents of public value, fuel storage facilities, and then also power installations needed in an emergency. And the reason these are defined is because the regulation is that, and this is listed elsewhere in the ordinance, that unlike any other building in that area where the minimum height needs to be the base of a 100-year flood, the height for these particular institutions would actually need to be the height of the 500-year flood. But the only change that's happening here is that 4th statement previously just said power installations needed in an emergency, but as amended, it would say emergency response facilities and power installations. So I think there was an error of omission there that emergency response facilities, for whatever purpose, it's the same level of importance to the community as a power installation, where if that facility is impacted, that's going to have a ripple effect across the community. So moving on to page 7, there's another this is a brand new term, repetitive loss, which is defined as a structure covered by a national flood insurance policy that has incurred flood-related damages on 2 occasions during a 10-year period on the date of the event for which a second claim is made, in which the cost of repairing the damage equaled or exceeded 25% of the market value at the time of such flood event. So this actually relates to another term on the following page, which is substantial damage. And that is one that's always been defined in this ordinance. And prior to the 2021 update, it was substantial damage solely referred to when a building was damaged in one event, and that particular event the damage was at over 50% of the value. So essentially the majority of the building's value was impacted by that damage. But back in 2021, so this is one of those items where the model ordinance provides two alternative options. Substantial damage could refer either to one event of 50% damage or two events of at least 25% damage over a 10-year period. And that way, you could have a property that's repeatedly getting damaged by these floods, but just not to the extent of that one individual 50% damage event. And those individuals, landowners, would be entitled to the same type of funding assistance options through there. There's a particular program called Increased Cost of Compliance. And so when we amended that last time, that changed it so that going forward, homeowners in Des Moines County could use that same standard of those two separate damage events. Now this new term, repetitive loss, is already a term that's used in the insurance industry to refer to that instance where there is repeated events over that 10-year period. But the DNR is now recommending that term be included in the ordinance as well, specifically because it's just to ensure that it's consistent with those state and federal standards and the terminology being used. So really, it really doesn't change anything of how we already enforce it. It just adds that term and makes it clear what that's referring to, because it's likely going to come up because when there isn't an instance where somebody has damage like that, they will ultimately need some sort of correspondence submitted from the local administrator that confirms that that level of damage has occurred. And so basically they'll submit a copy of the claim that was filed, and it highlights all of the cost, the items that factored into the cost of the damage, and then we need to review that to confirm that it meets those standards. And so because there's correspondence involved there, and that term repetitive loss is used in those instances, this just makes sure it's clear that we are recognizing that term as.
But the way it reads to me is you have to have two losses.
Right.
It doesn't matter if one of them's 51%.
Two of at least 25%.
Yeah, but I mean, one loss, if you have a 50% loss, then this doesn't apply.
Well, it's meant to, because previously the standard was higher. You had to prove you had 50% damage. And so repetitive loss doesn't refer to that. This is just the subset of substantial damage events where that occurs.
Okay.
So, again, it doesn't change how we enforce it. It's just adding that term to the
Subtitle.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Any other comments before we move on to the next chapter? Okay, so the next chapter is the actual floodplain management standards. This is Article 4. So these are the actual regulations pertaining to floodplain development. So the first change here is in Section A, General Floodplain Standards. So this one is just for the sake of consistency with the state floodplain management rules, specifically because the existing ordinance contains a citation about review by the Iowa Department of Natural Resources is not required for proposed construction of new or replacement bridges or culverts, and then it has a couple of conditions there about how much land is drained by that stream and whether it's associated with a channel change, and it has a specific citation in Iowa code. So because the code itself at the state level is being changed, this passage is rendered obsolete. So that's just removing that for the sake of consistency there. And then the next change this is on the top of page 11. The section actually starts on the previous page, but this is a similar one here. So this is a set of regulations that apply specifically to residential structures to be developed or modified within the floodplain. So the current ordinance states that all new residential structures located in areas that would become isolated due to flooding of surrounding ground shall be provided with a means of access that will be passable by wheeled vehicles during the base flood. So that's essentially, for whatever reason, you've got an area of high ground, whether that was based on fill that was brought in or whatever. So in any case, it's a new home that's being built in that area. It needs to be provided with access that would be passable during the flood, and that itself becomes submerged. So there was previously a statement at the end that said, however, this criterion shall not apply where the administrator determines there is a sufficient flood warning time for the protection of life and property, and then when estimating flood warning time, consideration shall be given to the criteria listed in, and it has a specific chapter and passage in Iowa Administrative Code. So once again, this is another thing that's been changed at the state level, and so for the sake of consistency, that section is being removed. And essentially the result of that is it's a higher standard. So basically, if someone wants to build in an area like that where it would be potentially cut off, you gotta provide access to it somehow so that the road does not become impassable, or the driveway does not become impassable in such an event.
But I think it should mention Brian by name. That sounds like a responsibility fit.
I personally was trying to read through this, see if we could just not mention road stuff at all here. We have to go through a million permit things. I don't know why we need a local one. Is it mandatory, Jared?
What?
For anything road related to being here?
Well, I know that particular passage, I assume it would mostly apply to the private driveways.
Yeah. But I was talking earlier and talked about you cross a bunch of stuff out for bridges and culverts. I already have DNR and Corps of Engineers stuff I have to do.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think that's the intent, is to eliminate the redundancy there for those types of things. Alright, so the next part of that chapter is on page 12. There was a section that was initially just called recreational vehicles. Because of the section that they're recommending we add, I changed it so that the title says recreational vehicles and campgrounds. So basically this relates to any instance where there will be recreational vehicles within the floodplain. And so the first section that's not changing basically addresses situations, because the previous section talks about factory-built homes or mobile homes, whatever the terminology may be. In this case, it says that RVs are exempt from that based on the nature of that being a vehicle that could be removed easily, compared to a mobile home, which would, despite the name, could still be moved, but not as readily as an RV. But then there's a section they're recommending to be added specifically for an RV campground, where it's a business where there will be campground where there'll be multiple spaces for multiple RVs to be parked there. And so basically it says any campground with overnight lodging, and again, this is within the floodplain, so it's obviously it's not regulating overall, but it's whenever such a facility would happen to be within a floodplain, any campground with overnight lodging shall have an evacuation plan that includes the following: responsible parties for carrying out the evacuation plans, action stages that are based on stream levels, gauge data, or weather forecasts as appropriate, and then finally a detailed list of actions that need to be taken to ensure that all vehicles and campers are evacuated, including how notifications are to be delivered. So this is the opposite of some of those previous changes that were about removing a passage from state code. This is adding one in.
Are we imposing a mandatory responsibility on conservation?
This would, I was gonna pull up JS and see, but I suspect this would apply to our Skunk River campground. I think it sits in the floodplain.
Well, I'd be interested to hear your take on that. Then if you can look it up, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, I think an important clarification there is when we're taught this, and we'll actually get to a separate chapter that is being added that addresses this topic. So this ordinance is meant to regulate new development as it occurs. So if someone wants to build something new, then it has to comply with these standards, or conceivably modifying an existing use or rebuilding it. It's the same as with zoning. It's not retroactive. So if something was previously established, these specific standards we wouldn't force that on something that was already there.
But if they clear an extra 500 feet to make a little room for an additional camper or two.
conceivably that would be applicable if it's actually being enlarged from what was there, that the overall capacity of that campground is being expanded.
So just exclude county conservation parks. Why would we bring it?
Well, I'm not,
There's
that's the reason I
so
brought it
many
up.
regulations, why would we bring regulations onto ourselves?
Make Chris's wife any.
Well, I can ask about that,
Okay.
follow up at the end. I mean, I know that realistically, the intent is we're talking about private entities that are establishing things, so.
I get that, so we could exclude, I just,
Yep,
Yeah, it seems like, just add the word private in there and that kind of
right.
Yeah.
makes it.
It's pretty clear it's not going to affect you because it says right in this code that they have to be movable, quick connect, hook up, electric, you pull a sewer pipe out, no buildings attached to it. We don't allow buildings to get attached to any campground, so.
Sure.
And you don't even let the people at the host attach anything to their camper, so this isn't even gonna affect the conservation.
I'm giving you a copy here, I can give you a digital copy too.
Yeah, just email it to me, that'd be great. You got anything else coming up that I need to weigh in on? I got a 10:30 I need to bail on.
Well, there is that chapter about non-conforming uses later, but I guess we could skip ahead to that. I don't know, it's because I already touched on it because of that, but this is broader, so it applies to any use, but let's just do that and then we can go back to the administration chapter for last. So we go to page 20 then. This is the one instance where we're actually adding a new article to the ordinance, so this would cause the last two articles to renumber accordingly. So this is the new Article 6. And this is actually one, my contact at DNR had informed me that this had actually been part of the model ordinance before, but I think this is maybe just an oversight that they hadn't specifically recommended we adopt this before. So it's not brand new to the state regulations, but it is something that's been part of that they are recommending we adopt. I mean, technically, even without it, we can kind of infer this stuff, but just going forward, it helps to have this specifically cited because, so basically, the topic of non-conforming uses is it's the same term that's typically used in the context of zoning, and it's the fancy way of saying it's grandfathered in, basically something that was built or established prior to the ordinance being established, or prior to an amendment to those regulations that would have impacted that particular type of development. So conceivably then, like a campground that was established when we had a flood ordinance, but before we had that particular regulation would be considered non-conforming there. But so this basically ensures that the ordinance has a definition for what a non-conforming use is and how it relates to development going forward, because it's one thing to say that a building is a non-conforming use as it exists now, but then there's important questions following that in terms of what if somebody wants to expand it, whether that means outward so that it has a larger footprint, or possibly adding it vertically, or even actually, in the case of a floodplain, as is commonly the case, raising a cabin so that the lowest floor is above the floodplain. The definition here, it says a non-conforming use is a structure or the use of a structure which was lawful before the passage or amendment of this ordinance, but which is not in conformity with the provisions of this ordinance, may be continued subject to the following conditions. The first condition is that if such a use is discontinued for at least 6 consecutive months, any future use of the building premises shall conform to this ordinance. So if you stop using it for whatever reason, then it has to conform from then on. The next one, uses or adjunct uses thereof that are or become nuisances shall not be entitled to continue as non-conforming uses. And then lastly, if any non-conforming use or structure is damaged by any means, including flood, so it could be fire, tornado or whatever else. It shall not be reconstructed if the cost equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure before that damage occurred, unless it is in conformity with the provisions of the ordinance. So this relates to that previous condition about substantial damage and repetitive loss, or in this case it would just be the substantial damage. That if it's being completely rebuilt as opposed to just raised or modified, then if you're completely rebuilding the structure from scratch, then it has to be in conformity with those standards. And then, yeah, 'cause it says under the subsection there, this limitation shall not include the cost of any alteration to comply with existing state or local health, sanitary, building, or safety codes, or cost related to altering a structure on the National Register of Historic Places, provided that that alteration shall not preclude its continued designation. So that relates to SHPO standards for the historic properties. And then there's one last section here at the end about variances. So the ordinance already provides for the option for the owner can request a variance from the county. There's some pretty strict standards that have to be met for that, including that the DNR needs to ultimately concur with the decision to grant that variance and the conditions involved. But ultimately, that's the authority of the board to grant a variance if requested. So this statement basically says, except as provided in the previous section, any use which has been permitted as a variance shall be considered a conforming use. So essentially, a non-conforming use has to have been something that attained that status on its own without being permitted by the county. So either we had newly adopted the ordinance and now it becomes non-conforming, or we newly adopted an amendment which caused it to become conforming. If somebody requests a variance, that was a specific action taken by the county in that particular case, so that would not be considered a non-conforming use, and those previous statements, like if it's damaged by fire or whatever, or it's discontinued for 6 months, those would not apply in something that was allowed through a variance.
So Jared, just so I'm clear on this. So on number one, if such use is discontinued for at least 6 months, so this puts guardrails in place so that somebody can't come in, say, on an empty lot along the Mississippi River and say, well, there was a cabin here
Right.
X number of years ago, so that's grandfathered in, I can rebuild that cabin.
Well, cabin's not there, so you can't do it.
Right. I mean, that's again, it's
When that's there.
yeah. Because right now, if that's not stated, if something is not permitted by the ordinance, it's still an unlawful use. But this case just makes it clear that if someone's trying to claim something like that, but if there was something there before, like it's not good indefinitely. It's just within 6 months if it's been in place. But then because that allows, like, if you want to replace an existing non-conforming use, if say it was damaged, you could go through that process. And it's not as if it's sitting there vacant for a long time. You're in the process of replacing it. Whereas if it was destroyed 20 years ago and you never did anything, it's treated as it doesn't apply.
So then on number 3, say that the place gets a fire or a flood, and somebody decides they want to rebuild it. If that cost is going to exceed 50% of the original value, so if it was an old dilapidated cabin.
Market value.
So how do you determine what that value was? You're gonna look at the assessments? I could see that being something somebody pushed back against. So, let's say they had I'm thinking of some of the cabins that I see up and down the river, right? And, some of them are plywood and shingles. They're not that great, but somebody comes in there, tears it down, and decides I'm gonna, it flooded, I'm gonna tear it down and rebuild it. I should be allowed to do that. But because that cabin that was originally there, that, because it's riverfront property, that should be worth $200,000. And where's the standard for establishing that value?
Well, like this comes into play when someone requests that increased cost of compliance funding and they need the sign off from the administrator. So we've dealt with that a couple of times when somebody was gonna raise a cabin to protect it from future damage. And I think in those cases, we did use the assessed value at the county's assessed value at the time. I think it's up to interpretation, but I think that's typically the common, because it's the most reliable form of that, to use the assessed value of the structure itself and not the entire property, not the land, or just the structure.
I can just see that as being something that you push back against, somebody trying to fudge the original market value of the structure so that they can build a much more expensive, nicer place.
Well, I think that's why we use that.
Then we're gonna get it for back taxes then.
Yeah.
There we go.
And then there's some other stuff in here we'll be talking about later about costs that's submitted, that making sure that includes the costs of materials and labor. So I think there's a lot of what we have here is meant to have quality control built in there, so that it's not just whatever they claim it might be. That there has to be some sort of baseline standard for how we're determining this value that's consistent from one property to the next.
So is this saying, in general, we have a record flood and whatever the non-conforming structure is washes out, but it's insured or whatever it is? And you're a landowner dealing with the mess that you've got, and you're trying to put something back up that if you can't get that, whatever that non-conforming, you just want identical to what you had.
Mm-hmm.
That you can't get that baby back up within 6 months, we're gonna swoop up and say, nope, you're out of luck. Because if that's what we're saying, the example earlier was 20 years from now, you can't go put the same non-conforming use on. But my example is if a disaster hits and somebody loses something and they want to put the same thing back in, 6 months is not long to play with insurance. 6 months is almost impossible to do anything with construction. I guess what I'm saying is 6 months too short? It seems like we might be coming from a guy that just got done about a year and a half later fixing tornado damage, and had a good insurance company that was good to work with. Is that too short for this situation?
I could follow up with DNR on the specific terminology here, but I think the intent is that when it says that a use is discontinued for 6 months, because there's a separate item below that references damage, a damage event, I think those are meant to, discontinuing doesn't mean it's damage. That means voluntary ceasing to use a property for.
They just let it fall out of whatever.
Right. I believe that's the intent.
So in that scenario, somebody wants to put something back up, they just can't get it done. What kind of leeway are they given?
Right.
Yeah. Well, ultimately there is the variance provision here. If you look at page 18, I know there's a lot of detail there, but basically it provides standards for if somebody just cannot meet the standards of the ordinance for whatever reason, there is a process that they can go through so that could conceivably be allowed in that particular instance, and not just allow it across the board without going through that process.
So if they're making progress, if they're working, they're making progress, and that 6 month period comes, they fulfilled most of their obligation, right?
Well, with all due respect, I'm not sure that matched my question.
Okay.
Maybe that explanation does, but again, let's go back to somebody's got a gazebo. I don't know what we're talking about, but a structure. They want to put the same thing back in because they like to spend the summers down by the river, and that's all they need is something to sit underneath. I don't know. Why would we, if we don't have to, push that person through a variance process? I guess my point is to me a variance is I want to use this property, it's different than what you're allowing, okay, it makes sense, so we're gonna run it through a variance. I'm still talking about the lot. I mean, that happens. River comes up, things go downriver, expected or unexpected. It does happen. I just, you kind of jump to a variance away from the time frame. I'm still back to, what's it gonna take for somebody to put something back in that you can consider non-conforming? Why would we push them? I don't care what the DNR says, unless it's required, they can take a leap. So what's it gonna take for them to be able to build that back? Are they gonna have to come for a variance, even if it was originally non-conforming? I'm just looking to protect the person that loses something unexpected. That's all they want to put it back in. I don't know why we would, unless we have no choice, why would we force more headache on them than we have to?
I get it. I can certainly follow up and just get some clarification, and if there's a way to modify that makes that easier, we can certainly look into that, but.
Okay, thank you. And that's the board's, I'm just giving my input, that's the board's idea whether they like it or not. I just no reason to make things harder if we don't have to.
Yeah, I get it. On first glance, some of that language in there, I was kind of wondering that myself, but a couple other things, like whether that's, how that would be applied. Again, I just haven't had a chance to go through that in detail, with staff at DNR, so I'll be sure to follow up and make sure we're clear on that stuff going forward.
Of course.
Hey, Chris, you're late.
Yeah. Story of my life.
Well, any other questions, comments related to non-conforming uses? Otherwise, there's the one chapter before that we have to go through. Okay, so we move back to page 16. This is Article 5, Administration. So this pertains to the actual enforcement of the ordinance through the administrator and the board, wherever applicable. So the Section B, Duties and Responsibilities of Administrator. So this, there's a number of things in here that are not changing, obviously, about what the administrator needs to do in terms of enforcing the ordinance, applying permit applications, and reviewing those. There is a section here, Section 8, which talks about maintaining the accuracy of the flood insurance rate maps. So previously, the only thing in reference there is that the administrator would need to maintain the accuracy of those maps when development placed within the floodway results in an increase in the base flood elevations or an alteration to the floodway boundary. So the floodway is that portion of the floodplain that's supposed to be kept open, that is expected to have moving water in the event of a flood. So it's basically the river or stream itself, and then the flat ground around it that would maintain that flow. Whereas the flood fringe is the area around that where potentially the water could be moving, but for most of the duration of the flood, it's expected to just be stationary. So this basically says that if development occurs which would cause a change in how that floodway behaves, that's something that the administrator would need to inform the FEMA about those changes and make sure that those maps could be updated accordingly as necessary. So the latest recommendations here are to include a couple more items. Number one, development occurs within a zone A, AE, or there's a couple other types here, basically different floodplain zones that does not include a designated floodway, and such development will cause a rise of more than 1 foot in the base flood elevation. Realistically, this is largely just going to refer to zone A, which is the one where there isn't a distinction between the fringe and the floodway. And so basically this is, because there's still going to be a functional floodway within that area, just because it isn't mapped, there's still an impact there. Usually these are more in the interior of the county where you've got more of a drop off between the surrounding landscape and where the stream is. So realistically, this is going to be very infrequent where development occurs in those areas, but this provision ensures that even in those cases where a floodway is not mapped, that same level of attention needs to be focused on if a development is going to impact the flood capacity of that stream. And then also, the final item there, development relocates or alters the channel of a stream within a special flood hazard area. So that's similar thing where basically how that stream behaves going forward is gonna be different and could conceivably impact the areas around it as a result of that change. And so it could be conceivable that such a change would be allowed by this ordinance, but because that relocation would cause downstream effects in the surrounding area, that could necessitate that those maps be revised accordingly.
So, Jared, real quick, just kind of a random question. When it says maintain the accuracy of Des Moines County's flood insurance rate maps when any of the following occurs, does that really just mean notify the people that create the floodplain map so if something changes, they can update it?
I believe that's the standard terminology that they use in the model ordinance. So I believe that's the intent of that.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's your interpretation of maintain.
Yes.
Okay.
So going forward, if there's a question of whether those are still going to be accurate, and that there could be a potential impact in the surrounding area that was caused by that development.
Well, I only ask because they're very specific about a rise of more than 1 foot. And even myself, who's a licensed engineer, really can't sit there and tell you in a floodplain scenario what something built is going to do to the water elevation. I'm just curious. It's a tough thing to judge. It's very expensive to create. Just as an example, when we built the new bridge on the edge of Burlington over the Flint Creek on Highway 99, because of the DNR's regulations for being in a floodway, they mandated that we had to use one specific software to do the floodwater modeling, which we didn't have and had no access to. It's an antiquated type software. We spent 40 grand to go to a consultant to have that done. Even our own consultant couldn't do it. They had to sub it out to a different consultant. So it's I just wanted to make sure that we're not on the hook every time something happens to be stuck going and proving that it's either over a foot or under a foot or something to that effect. Because that is again, not necessarily, even if it's not the same software, it's still a process where you're gonna go hire a consultant because the floodplain it's not a bathtub. It's big, it's wide, it's got trees, it's got flow issues, it's got all that sort of stuff that somebody's gonna have to model. So it's just, want to make sure that we're not hanging ourselves out there for some unfunded mandate type of dynamic.
Okay, I get it. And I think the intent really, because I mean, realistically, the vast majority of development that we would see within the floodplain is going to be minimal enough that the impact is really limited to that specific area. And typically it's going to be things that doesn't involve a substantial amount of fill or actually changing the course of the stream. I think it's meant that these are exceptional instances that aren't going to happen very often, but just to make sure that because those types of things would have a broader impact beyond that immediate vicinity and that immediate same property owner that's involved here, that's the intent, is that it's really those larger scale projects that could conceivably have that impact. And by having this stated that way in here, when one of those instances occurs, we have the language to back that up.
I understand the intent.
Yeah.
It's more the liability to the county.
Yep.
That just the way it's worded, I just want to make sure that that's not, the way it's worded, in my book, puts it back on the county to say, yep, we've done the modeling and this is whatever this isolated situation is, it's going to increase it by a foot. We'll do that modeling, as I mentioned, is not cheap and easy. So that's why I'm asking the question. I don't have experience with applying this. So.
Yep, I'll have some discussion on some of these items here, and I'll be sure to look into that a little bit more. Okay, so this is kind of a similar thing. I had briefly addressed this with the person at the DNR when we first submitted the recommendations about a month or so ago, but haven't discussed it in much detail since. But so at the end of section B, number 11, it says, this is another one of the administrator duties, submit to the Federal Insurance Administrator an annual report concerning the community's participation utilizing the annual report form supplied by Federal Insurance Administrator. I can say right off here that this is not something that I'm aware of. Zach or myself have done in the years administering this, or Jeff Hannon previously. This was, apparently it was in the model ordinance all along, and so this is standard procedure here, but since I've had no prior familiarity with actually doing this process, I think that is one I would definitely need to clarify. They obviously want that to be included in here, but I'm not sure what the realistic expectation for that is, or how much. I mean, realistically, I would assume a lot of the time, very little would be needed for that report, given the types of projects we normally administer. But again, they're recommending it, so for now it's in the draft as something they want to see in there. But I'll certainly ask for some clarification on that about how exactly that we would obtain that information, those forms, and whether it really is expected that would be an annual thing in all instances. So under floodplain development permit, section C, section C2, this talks about the application being submitted for a floodplain development permit. So it basically describes what kinds of information need to be supplied. So things like description of work to be covered, where is the land, where is it located, size of the property, dimensions of buildings, and any additions that would be built onto that building, the elevation of the base flood in that area, and then the lowest floor of the building, assuming that it's the type of building that those standards would apply in accordance with the previous article. So the one change that's being made here is in regards to subsection G, where it says for structures being improved or rebuilt, the estimated costs of improvements and the market value of the structure prior to the improvements. So that's how it is currently written, and what is being recommended is so that it's changed to, instead of just the estimated costs, it would say a detailed cost estimate of proposed improvements, including the true cost of both labor and materials. So this is clearly meant as a quality control thing, that making sure that if they say it's going to cost such and such amount of dollars, that it's understandable that they obtain that from a reliable source, and that's backed up by, if you break that down into labor and materials, what does that actually mean? So this is just a way of making, I'm sure this is based on the previous wording would have allowed a lot of projects to come through with questionable data that may result in issues once it was actually implemented. So this is one of those changes to the state flood management rules that was within this past year. So this is based on experience. They just want to have more quality control in terms of the costs that are submitted for that. Well, since we already discussed the non-conforming uses chapter, that brings us to the end of the individual changes. So I guess now that we've gone through all of those, if there's any general thoughts or anything that we've discussed already that you may have thought of, a question that you want to offer at this time.
I would be interested in some of the responses to your questions.
Yeah, I apologize for not having that all straightened out. The intent was to try to get feedback on those items before we had the work session, because I know you wanted to have one with another work session on an unrelated matter next week, and I wanted to just make sure we kept the ball rolling here. But unfortunately, I think the person I was working with may have either been on vacation or for whatever reason I wasn't able to get a response in time. So, but I think we have a few specific items that we can clarify. But overall, you're generally familiar with what the scope of what we're dealing with here and what would actually be involved in the the updated ordinance. And basically, once we get to a point where we've cleared up any of those remaining questions, we can, if you want, we can have another work session, just a quick run through that. I could always provide it by email and then just see what you guys think. But ultimately, our aim is to proceed forward so that we can do the readings in April, and that way, if the final reading is around the end of April, that way we got a month of breathing room before those maps go into effect. So, and I'll work with coordinate with Sarah on getting the appropriate public notices, because there'll need to be a hearing with that because it's a readoption of an ordinance. Go ahead, Jim.
I would like your email as you update. I don't care if you get an update on one, I want it. If you get an update tomorrow on another, and I want that. Just keep us informed.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely. I'll keep Brian as well, so.
yeah.
Good.
Might want to shoot at Chris as well.
Yep, certainly, yep.
You satisfied, Thomas?
And then, there's one thing on there that, you know, who assesses the value of it, so DNR didn't specify that in there, so are we going to use the assessor's valuation what he's got on this then?
I think that's usually not, the ordinance itself usually says market value, so I don't know if that's something where we would be okay to specify that anymore, but in practice, I think that's the idea. Yeah,
Because they've got an assessed value, the realtor's got market values,
right.
so, which is normally higher than the.
Yeah, I can discuss that with them again. I think when we first started, Zach and I first started administering those insurance claims where they're looking for the funding assistance to repair, that was kind of the thing that was the initial question we had about where we get that information from, and so I think that was the general consensus, is that because that's a reliable figure that can be used consistently from one property to the next, that would be the most fair overall.
You satisfied?
Yep.
Sarah Marie, anything to add?
Nope, I'm satisfied.
Thank you, Jared, appreciate it.